Hello, guys. Welcome to part two of Hope and Help, a sit down series chronicling the events and experiences of my coworkers at the organization Hope and Help. Today we have Amanda Cruz and Eric Fields. Welcome, guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
So I guess we'll jump right into things. My first question is, when did you guys first start at Hope and Help, and what were your respective job titles?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I started in 2018 and my job title was pretty much program manager of one of the grants.
Okay. And then what was your job title as of 2023?
As of 2023, it was the prevention director for the department.
For the department. Okay. And then what about you, Eric?
And I was diagnosed with HIV in 2015. And from that point, really wanted to get into that world and contribute to the community.
Yeah.
So I was hired at Hope and Help as a linkage coordinator.
Okay.
So brand new reactives, brand new to the state of Florida. I was the first layer to get them into care. I was also a tester as well. And then eventually I was promoted to the DOH prevention manager.
Got it. Okay. Now, based on the details it shared in the expose video, I want to touch on some events that were listed out. Amanda, in specific, one of your staff members, Lamia Makadam, was issued a final written warning due to her activism efforts outside of the organization. Essentially, in this warning, she was given a directive stating that she couldn't wear her ethnic cultural garment, specifically the keffiyeh. You were present for that meeting with HR, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
yeah.
I was.
When you heard about what was in this final written warning, what were your thoughts? Like, what was going through your mind? Because obviously this is kind of discriminatory.
Yeah. So anytime something that was going to happen within like the department, within my staff, I would be pulled in to be informed.
Yeah.
And as the HR person was going through everything, I was like, okay, this sounds really strange. I want to read this like final written warning. So I went through the whole paperwork and I was very clear that this was unlawful. So I was very clear to state that this was wrong, that I was not going to sign this. I had told the HR person that this was very murky waters, that I didn't understand why the persecution.
Yeah.
And then I knew that me not signing that letter would now make me become a target. And I specifically said that.
Yeah, and I mean, given the events that would follow after, that would be safe to assume. A letter was written to the board by staff members, asking for the board to intervene. And about 4 days after the board responded, you were terminated from your position. Can you tell me exactly what that conversation was like with leadership, with HR, the executive director? What were the reasons they gave you for, your termination?
So first of all, HR was not in the room.
Okay.
It was a third party HR, Don Sipley. They had actually contracted her previous months to do an investigation within Hope and Help and
Okay.
towards Lisa due to a lot of people,
Issuing
expressing
complaints.
Exactly.
Okay.
So-
So I'm assuming she was like some third-party HR firm specialist.
Third-party HR firm, which I didn't understand why, because there was an HR person. If you're going to bring in a third party, it should be someone who doesn't have,
Correct.
so who has more skills than the people that are inside. So I would have assumed that the appropriate party to come in would be a industrial psychologist, not a third-party HR who didn't have any education
Yeah.
in managing these types of crisis or
Especially in a healthcare setting, right?
exactly.
Okay. So with this, HR third-party person, what was the conversation like? Like, you're now fired, or what was told to you?
I remember going in, and so this meeting had been put on my calendar a week prior.
Earlier I mentioned 4 days after the board responded, you were terminated from your position. This meeting was put on your calendar a week
Yeah.
before that.
A week before I was terminated.
Okay.
Yes, because I remember sending a message to two people like, well, this is strange. I guess I'm having a one-on-one with Lisa. And that was the title, one-on-one. So it was at 9:00 in the morning, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember going in, sitting down, and it's only Don Sibley and the executive director, Lisa Barr. And I'm looking at the paper and I see termination. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I wonder who they're going to tell me now. Who are they going to want to terminate?
Yeah.
And as I'm sitting down and I'm moving closer to the paperwork, I see my name on it. And my whole body just shut down.
Yeah. And what were the reasons they provided for your termination?
The reasons that they provided for my termination was that I had done a HIPAA violation. And this was all, I want to say, months prior, like a month before, because we worked closely, like doing all myself and the data person doing all the reports. We had been requested something very specific, and it was to send documents towards the correctional department for specific people that they had in their care. So they had gave me specific instructions. I followed the specific instructions, did everything as they requested. And I had actually, as soon as I sent everything that they requested, I asked them to verify, is everything okay? Everything was okay. And I have all those emails to prove that was literally it. That was the extent of it. Okay. And they said that I had pretty much done a HIPAA violation on the specific instructions that I had been requested. And I was completely in shock because I was like, I followed specifically everything that I was told to do. And they said that Ryan White had requested my termination.
Okay. So.
And that they couldn't do anything about it, that their hands were tied, that, yeah.
This HIPAA violation in specific, was it a leaking of client information?
No.
I mean, like you just said, Ryan White, the third-party entity, they requested these files and documents from you. You sent them over directly to them. So
as a continuation of care, because that's what happens when you are in partnership with different organizations or stakeholders. It's called continuation of care in HIV.
So I guess I'm struggling to understand where exactly the HIPAA violation occurred. Like, obviously you followed protocol and you have the emails to corroborate this. So I'm assuming this was just an excuse conjured up out of thin air to oust you from the organization as a result of your not wanting to comply with this write-up.
Yeah, I think this was the perfect storm for them.
Yeah.
Because I was that gatekeeper for 23 people that everyone in the organization deemed problematic.
They never offered you a concrete reason for why they terminated you.
Yes, no. And in the termination letter, it stated that what Ryan White had told them was that there was a systemic issue within the organization due to not having detailed trainings on HIPAA.
Got it. And was it ever corroborated by Ryan White? Did Ryan White ever come out themselves stating that they requested your termination?
I had reached out to them to ask about this.
To confirm.
Yeah. And
no response back. But specifically this third-party HR person, Don Sibley, is the one who told you that that's what Ryan White requested. Got it.
That they could do nothing about it, that this was out of their hands completely, and they kept on repeating that this was all Ryan White's request.
Okay. And there was a letter that was written by Charlene Tolber, the Senior Director for Compliance and Strategy, where she confirmed in her conversations with the ED, the Executive Director, Lisa Barr, there was no communications between Ryan White and Lisa Barr asking or requesting that you be terminated.
Yeah. Charlene didn't even know about my termination, so they kept this away from another senior leadership person.
And I mean, that would make sense, right? Senior director for compliance and strategy, she should be made aware if somebody in the organization is being terminated, but she
Exactly.
wasn't.
No, she was not.
Okay.
Neither was another senior director. Like neither the finance person. They had kept this from them.
So is it fair to say that you do not fully believe the reasons that were provided to you for your termination?
I
Specifically believe what Lisa Barr or upper leadership provided as the reason for why they terminated your position.
Yes, I think that there was a lot going on, and this was the exact moment that they were looking for to remove the one person that was holding and pretty much advocating and protecting the rest of the staff. That was it. Like,
And if I may want to just add a point to that, right after they took her out of the building, Lisa called a company-wide meeting in person where she announced that Amanda had been fired, and they gave the exact same description that they gave her to the entire staff.
So they shared these confidential details around her employment.
The clinic staff, the case management staff, the prevention team, everyone was told specifically, this is why she was fired. It's not up to us. It's because of Ryan White. We were all in shock, but a gentleman named Morgan Manry piped up and said, well, what should we avoid doing so that we know not to get in trouble like she did?
Yeah.
And so they gave a speech about HIPAA laws. It was very vague, but I just remember thinking, this is really inappropriate. Even if someone is terminated for any reason, you don't literally have a meeting with the entire staff to go into detail explaining why she was fired.
after they had told me that this was supposed to stay within that room.
So they told you before they even announced the circumstances around your employment. They told you that this was confidential and it wasn't going to be leaked out to anybody else.
Right.
And the very next thing that happened was they announced it to the entire company.
Wow. Okay. Now you brought up Morgan Manry, and I'm going to get back to that because I understand you have experiences with Morgan. Mm-hmm. Amanda, you were present for a meeting that I, myself, and Anita Nunez, a trans woman, had with HR in regards to Morgan hurling racially insensitive comments towards us. My question to you is, have you ever had any other instances, or were you privy to any other instances where Morgan was called out on his behavior for being racially, culturally insensitive?
Yes, about 3 times before that, I had requested to HR a sit down with him because it had happened, I want to say 3 times before that, and that it continued to happen. And it happened specifically with Black employees.
So you, being a senior member of leadership, have witnessed multiple occasions where this white member of leadership, the patient assistance manager, has been either called out or quote unquote disciplined for being racist, culturally insensitive, and nothing was done.
Yes, every time I would follow up, they said that it wasn't something that they had to follow up with me on. Interesting.
Okay. Were there any other instances or personal interactions you had with Morgan Manry that made you feel uncomfortable or impeded your ability to do your job?
I think that all the times that he would jump in and question pretty much the way that I was doing my job, as to, for example, there were people that I would do like certain accommodations, knowing that they weren't a big fan of like being surrounded with a lot of people that impaired their job. So having them to be able to sit somewhere else, that was something that I had this like incessant back and forth with, as to why was that so problematic for him? Like, why did it bother him so specifically?
Yeah.
That people had, like, why were people sitting in the back of the common room?
And who were these people? member of staff, like
Member of staff of the prevention department, yes.
I mean, were these staff members a part of his department? I know he's a
Nope.
patient assistance coordinator.
No, they bothered no one. They did their job.
Okay, got it. Now, Eric, for you, you brought up Morgan Manry earlier.
Yes.
Were there any instances where Morgan made you feel uncomfortable, or did you have any personal run-ins with Morgan Manry?
Yes. Too many to mention, but the big ones were, we had a company-wide meeting for sensitivity to trans and non-binary folk.
Okay, this is the all-hands meeting Anita Nunez spoke to. Okay.
The all hands meeting. And I spoke with them in that meeting a little bit. And afterwards, Morgan gave me a call and he explained to me that there are two types of people in this world. There are victims who are takers, and that's all they do and that's all they know. And then there's the rest of us. And he said, Eric, I know you, and I know that you are not a taker. You're not a victim. You're not one of them. You're one of us, and you need to remember that. And I was like, the first thing that popped into my head was, is this The Godfather? Like, what does that even mean? Us or them, you know? So that was a big one.
And this was post
This was
the all hands meeting
this was the
involving
day
trans
of-
inclusion. Oh, the day of.
It was the day of, after the meeting. Things
Okay.
had started to kind of slow down. It was right at the end of the day. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's when I went, okay, I should, I know where I stand with this guy now.
Yeah. And were there any other instances?
So, as a linkage coordinator, my job was to listen and meet with these clients, assess their needs, and a lot of them needed patient assistance program to help them out until they got on insurance, until they, got on their feet. And Morgan runs that. And there was a specific time where a client, excuse me, had been returned. He said they don't get services. I know these people. They're grifters. They take advantage of the system. They're liars. Their situation's not that bad.
Who's saying this?
Morgan is saying this to me on.
This is the patient assistance coordinator.
Yes.
Who's tasked with helping out
I
patients.
did a linkage. I set them up for care. I sent them off. And so case management takes over and, all the other departments jump in. And his response was, not this one. He's a liar. We know him. Everyone knows him. Takes advantage of the system. So no services. I cut him off. And I found it confusing because this client was brand new to the state of Florida. And that's why they were trying to get into care. So I thought, well, that's strange. So I investigated it some more. I spent more time with the client, and I brought that back to Morgan, saying, you're mistaken. You have to be mistaken. There's no way you know this person. And he looked at the name, and he went, yeah, no, this isn't the one I was thinking of. Oh, well. And kept moving. So I don't know what came of that client, but they never got into care.
They just, you guys lost him.
He operated on his whims. If he was in a good mood, he would stop and joke with everyone in the office. If he didn't like you, he would go out of his way to make your life miserable. Yeah. And some other issues with Morgan. Once I got promoted, my office was right next door to Morgan Manry, and you can hear everything. Like crystal clarity, he could hear everything I said. I could hear everything he said. Our doors were predominantly open all the time. I'm going to try and be careful on how I word this.
Yeah.
But I heard him having a conversation with a client, and he started off making fun of her name.
Okay. Is this client of a certain background, racial background? Hispanic, Latino, Black?
His direct thing was like Shaniqua, Shanane, Shanana. And I obviously only heard one side of this conversation. But once he did that, there was a pause. I heard him like, oh, well, excuse me, you're the one with a complicated name. Do you want my help or not? Wow. And then there was a pause. I can only assume that the client was getting upset.
Yeah.
And he went, well, I guess you don't need services. Click.
So there seems to be an ongoing pattern of
yes,
this person abusing their authority, abusing their position, and as a result, it's affecting our patients' ability to get into care.
Yes.
And you have people now lapsing out of care, people who need these vital resources. And you guys are working at an AIDS service organization and HIV.
We have the money. We have the resources. Sometimes resources are spread thin. You know what I mean? There's an ebb and flow to like how much resources we can give. But there was nothing stopping these people from getting these services except he wasn't feeling it that day.
Yeah. And then it kind of becomes like this cycle, right? Because you have someone who is experiencing directly how this damages a client's services, coming up and doing what they're supposed to do, complain about the situation. And myself in the position to go ahead and move forward with this complaint, and then being shut down constantly,
yes,
or being told that absolutely this is going to be resolved, and I'm just waiting, going back, and then having to go back to the same person and say, I don't know, like, I haven't heard anything, keep on following up, no one tells me anything, and that would automatically put that person in a position of like anger.
Yeah.
Because now you're having this whole circle, like you're seeing that nothing is being done from any side. And it's just, and at the end of the day, this just affects the community.
I do have one last thing with Morgan, if I may share.
Yeah.
So, in around December, I believe, I preemptively took a short leave of absence and took care of some of my mental health.
Okay.
My anxiety and depression was really weighing on me because of the work environment.
Yeah.
And when I came back, I was in my office. My door was open. He was in his office. His door was open. He was having a very loud, gregarious, fun conversation with someone. And he was saying very disparaging things about the prevention team as a whole. Mm-hmm. They're a mess. They're crazy. But what do you expect? Their manager just Baker acted himself. How good can they be when the person who's supposed to be leading them is running around trying to kill himself? So of course they're going to be crazy. And in that moment, I jumped on our team's chat to Wes Gollum, our HR manager, and I said, Wes, this is what he is saying right now as I type this. I remember it was 1:50 in the afternoon because I said, Wes, mark the time. You can look at the phone record of whoever he's talking to about this. And he was laughing. He's making fun of it. And Wes said, write a report and send it to me. And I responded, Wes, you are a 2-minute walk away from my office. He's still talking about it. If you get up and walk over here, you will hear him. You won't even have to walk into the office. You can stand in the hallway. Anyone in the hallway was hearing this. Please come over and listen. And he said, write a report and send it to me. But I just remember telling Wes in that moment, first of all, I heard the context,
yes,
clear as day. He was talking about me. He was talking about the prevention department. But that's when I realized this is more than just a terrible boss. There's terrible bosses in every job, right? But for him to absolve himself of any wrongdoing, I would have rather nothing came from that situation than to have the comeback be, no, Eric, he's not making fun of you and your suicidal tendencies, which I was not having. at that moment because, again, I went in preemptively.
Yeah.
And I am, to be honest, very proud of myself for doing that. I don't have anything to be ashamed of that. Part of why I do this work is to help end the stigma with these things. So I am open about it.
So I want to, you said a lot. I want to make sure I get this clear.
Sorry. Yeah, no, that was a lot.
You essentially have a patient assistance manager or coordinator, whatever his job title is. You essentially had a patient assistance manager, another coworker of yours, share explicit details about your healthcare to an undisclosed
I
person.
have no idea who.
Over the phone.
It was not a whispered conversation. It was a gossip session. That was the tone. It was, girl, can you believe it?
And this is on the clock, on Hope and Help's time. And when you had that follow-up conversation with HR's response to him essentially trying to say he was talking about somebody else was...
Wes told me he wasn't talking about you.
I don't know what's worse.
And you misunderstood.
The human resources manager.
Yes. And I said, Wes, the conversation started with him making fun of the prevention team and then brought me into it as the reason. So that's black and white.
Yeah. And my follow-up question is, are you receiving any sort of care from Hope and Help? Or at the time, were you?
So at the time, I was not only an employee, I was also a client.
So you were a patient receiving care through the organization.
Yes. And
well, isn't that a conflict of interest? A patient assistance manager having access or being aware of your personal information and disclosing that over the phone with somebody you did not consent to have that information?
So after this, because Morgan does, by the nature of his job, have access to the Provide system, the database, all the records, he can look up anyone's file that he wants to on a whim. So I will say after that, and after Wes's non-response, I sought out the Department of Health. We have two managers. There were two of us over the prevention department. Someone else ran the CDC grant side, and I was the Department of Health side. So I went to the Department of Health, and I talked about these issues and all of the other issues that we were having. And I sat down with him and had a heart-to-heart and really, from a place of like hope that this can be fixed, type of a thing. And I spelled it all out for him. Response was, "Oh, I'm friends with Morgan. I'm seeing him later this week. Do you want me to talk to him for you?" And I went, "No, that's the last thing I want to hear." And he said, "Well, Morgan's Morgan. He's always been that way. He's always going to be that way. There's nothing you can do about it. You should quit." Direct quote. And I got emotional, started crying, got up to leave. And on my way out the door, he said one more thing. "Do not ever come back here and say anything about Hope and Help to us. Do not report anything to us. Period."
Department of Health.
The Department of Health told me to quit. Well, he told me to quit because he's friends with Morgan. I mean, he said it. He said he's not going to change. There's nothing you can do about it.
And I think that just says like that power, like the power that this person has within the position that he is, the person who he is. And it took me a while to realize that I was never in a position of power compared to what this.
I definitely felt in that moment, I screwed myself over. I just complained.
Trying to advocate for yourself.
I just complained and brought genuine issues to the highest authority. Mm-hmm. And their response was, "Oh, I'm friends with them." And I don't know if you're familiar, there's a saying here in Florida, like the good old boy mentality, old boomer generation, white. You hear it a lot with cops, right? They look out for their own. They'll cover each other's asses at all costs. Anything else be damned. And I always associated that with straight white men. But there is a good old boy culture at Hope and Help where Lisa Barr, Morgan Manry, Wes Gollum, the case management leader, Raquel Luciano, they've been in this community so long. And I have no doubt that they have helped people. I have no doubt that at some point they got into this field genuinely to do good.
Yeah.
But that is all gone. They have grown callous, uncaring. They hate the clients. They don't like our clients. One of my jobs was running a support group, and we offer Lyft rides for the members that don't have a car. And Morgan was in charge of that. And sometimes he would deny it. I would give pushback. Why not? Always a different answer, never a clear answer. He would say, yep, it's all taken care of. And then an hour before the meeting, sorry, no, not happening.
And these are resources that are allocated,
That are
set
available.
aside for these support groups.
This is a chunk of money that should be sitting there only for this. And it was
that's
cut off.
being denied. You're getting
That's being
pushed back.
denied.
Also, money that is allocated within the grant, so that has to be spent.
It has to be spent on that. Wow. So, I mean, you said some pretty troubling things.
Yeah.
And for you to be an employee or a former employee at this organization and say they hate our clients, they hate our patients. I mean, it's pretty damning. That's pretty concerning.
There are, for example, quite a few case managers who are doing the work.
Yeah.
There are a lot of amazing people at Hope and Help, and they are working tirelessly so hard. They're in it for the right reasons, but they are doing it under duress. They're doing it under so much,
Ineffective leadership.
so many obstacles. And I would often, one of my frustrations was, think of how much better we all could be by getting these roadblocks out of the way.
And you're saying this as a member of leadership yourself.
Yes, at that time I was the Department of Health Prevention Manager.
So my follow-up question for you, Eric, and then I'm going to come back to you, Amanda, is you were simultaneously not only a member of leadership at this organization, but a patient. After you pretty much disclosed that.
Yes.
What would you say to people who may potentially end up seeking care at this organization? I mean, you said a lot of concerning things. Is it a safe space for, folk who are seeking care, folk who are living with HIV and they want to see a case manager, they want to see a provider? Is this organization the appropriate space given some of the things that you highlighted in this interview?
So that's a complicated question because those of us with HIV, especially living here in Florida, we only have so many options. There are only so many places that have Ryan White case management. So for example, they wore me down, they broke me, and I quit. But I am still right now technically a client of them because I can't get them to switch to another organization. Because I lost my job, I don't have a car. The very least, they give you a bus pass so you can go to your doctor's appointments. They'll give you food vouchers. And I have been begging them for the past 6 weeks with nothing.
No response.
No response.
Are there barriers preventing them from being able to switch you over to another organization? I mean, how difficult is this process for somebody who isn't familiar with how HIV patient care works?
It depends on if there's any organizations that are taking new clients. A lot of them are at capacity.
Okay.
So to people that are prospective looking into maybe coming into care, I would say look at every other possible organization first. And if you have absolutely no other option, roll the dice.
Wow. Amanda, you ended up being terminated from your position. I want to ask how you're doing, where you're at. And what did you, I know you kind of touched and highlighted a little bit on your feelings post it being disclosed to you that you were being terminated, but do you feel like there was a sensitivity in handling that situation? And then kind of give us an idea of,
Yeah.
how you're doing now.
No, definitely no. And I'm sorry if I get a little emotional.
Yeah.
This has definitely been one of the most difficult things that have happened for me in a long time. And because of the position that I am in. But going into that termination and seeing everything, I mean, as I'm realizing that I'm the one being terminated and how Don Sipley and Lisa Barr handled everything was just so poor. I was so in shock and I started crying, and I remember like Dawn saying, "We have to get her out of here because she's getting overly emotional." And I looked at her and I said, "What?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I have a child. Like, how am I not supposed to get overly emotional?" This was 2 days before I was leaving to my home country for vacation. So this was before the holidays. This was December 19th. So I'm just like, and then she looks at me and says, "Look at it this way. Now you have enough time to spend with your baby." And I was just like, is this for real? Like,
Stripping you of your livelihood.
I have never had any incident beforehand. Everything that happened, I would always use all my energy to sit down with leadership to try to like explain to them why a situation is happening, why an employee is angry, why do they deserve to be angry, why this is happening to them, why is it them? Like, I would sit down, have education sessions. I would pour all my energy to sitting down and having what I thought was educational conversations for them to understand where they were coming from, where we were coming from, so that they couldn't say, no one gave them the space to change their mind or anything. And it was just, it's shocking because you obviously pour yourself into like community work and also I tried and of course I made 1,000 mistakes, but making sure that people like felt loved, felt like they belonged, that this was a place that they could be in. I don't use a lot of like safe space in a sense. I don't think any work is a safe space.
Yeah.
But that at least they felt that they deserved to be there and do the community work that they loved to do. And that was what I hoped that I tried to do. But there was too many barriers happening and
Internally, yeah. So, I mean, did your termination affect you financially? I mean,
oh my God,
it's a given. It's obviously like
absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Eric, you ended up vacating your position at Hope and Help.
I did.
Can you tell us why? Ultimately,
Because
what led you to that decision?
ultimately, what led me to that decision was they were denying me services. I took a short-term disability leave. Wes, halfway through, said, "This is job abandonment. You didn't do it the right way." What are you talking about? I contacted the disability insurance. I contacted my psychiatrist. This was all signed off. They said, Eric, your HR doesn't have any say in this at this point. Like, it's done. You're good. You're golden. And Wes insisted, no, job abandonment. So I attached everybody from all the different agencies to that same email, and then it changed. And then, okay, we're good. And so I just thought, even on this time where I'm supposed to be recharging, getting my life back together, I'm still living day to day if I'm going to get cut off or not. But ultimately, what led me to quit was because I had taken so much time off to just deal with all of the BS, I needed renter's assistance, which is a service that is provided for those of us that are under the Ryan White program. My Ryan White, I'm going to be really clear about it. It expired on the 26th. So I needed to renew it by the 26th.
Yeah.
On March 8th, 9th, I contacted my referral specialist. I gave her all the documentation. Mind you, I have had HIV for how many years now? I've been in Ryan White for a very long time. I know exactly how the system works. I sent her everything she needed. We did the phone interview. Everything was great. Then on the 1st, my housing case manager informed me that I couldn't get renter's assistance because my Ryan White had lapsed. So I called them back. What's the deal? What are you talking about? They knew my situation, and they knew the dominoes that would fall if this very easy, simple 15-minute process wasn't done. And it wasn't done. So I'm behind in my rent. Several months. That rent assistance has not come in yet. I cannot get a hold of any of them to give me a bus pass. I don't have a car at the moment. So I know it might not be a good idea for me to be doing this while I'm still technically a client of them, but at the same time, I'm not getting anything from them. And sometimes I think of it as it's my own fault because I saw firsthand how they treated clients that they didn't like. So I made an enemy of myself by speaking up for Amanda, for Lamia, for all the other people in the prevention team. So I should have known, that I'm now one of them.
I think it's fair to say the organization has had, or the internal dealings of this organization has had a lasting impact on the both of you. So my question to you both is, what would you like to see happen with Hope and Help? What does justice look like for you? And you can answer that individually or...
For me, it's for the executive director to stand down, step down, have someone new with fresh ideas come in, to dismantle the upper leadership, the board, all the people that are just upholding all these
gatekeeping,
oppressive systems, oppressive forms of leadership.
And it's so bizarre because these are all people that went through, hell through the 80s, and you would think that
would carry into the work that they're doing now.
But no, because it's kind of one of these things like, I should have known. I mean, they're all white.
Yeah.
How they're going to protect that until the end,
with no regard for their multi-generational, multicultural staff. It definitely bleeds into the overall work culture.
Yeah.
How about you, Eric?
I think that Lisa Barr, Raquel Luciano, Morgan Manry, and Wes Gollum fired, resigned, go away. I think if those specific people were gone and competent, non-racists, non-transphobic, non-homophobic. I know that's a wild concept for a gay person to also be homophobic, but it is very possible and alive and well.
Yeah.
For them to move on and go find something else and bring, as Amanda said, anybody else in. Anything. The worst boss I've ever had in my life would be better. That being said, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't think that will ever happen.
No.
When the DOH itself,
Yeah.
the
Everyone
Department
knows
of
what's happening.
Health,
Yeah.
co-signs it and stands up for it.
Yeah, I think like when you realize that, that's when you're kind of like, oh my God, the joke has always been on me. Like, I should have known this before.
There was never a chance.
Yeah. I was just a body filling up a space. And that is, as soon as I wasn't convenient or upholding to their rules.
You were disposed of.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a pretty unfortunate thing to say, that you don't think in this lifetime or post all of this happening, you guys won't ever receive any sort of justice, recourse. And how does that make you guys feel?
Hopeless and helpless.
Hopeless and helpless. Hope and help.
I think that it's kind of like a grief process. And I think I'm still going through so many of the emotions, and because and then I go back and I say, wow, this was all because one or two people, three people didn't want to have any accountability, didn't want to learn, didn't want to uphold to their mistakes and say, okay, most definitely I could have done this better. How can I do better? Let me include more people in this conversation as to how can I do better? And let me, how can I move on? How can I be a better person? How can I be a better leader? Like that introspect didn't happen. And
Yeah.
due to that, we're all in this whirlwind of chaos.
Well, I want to say, as somebody who was formerly employed at the organization, I appreciate everything you guys did for me, for the syringe exchange team. We are the only syringe exchange in all of Central Florida, and I can tell you firsthand account how vital of a resource that is down here.
Oh my God, yes.
And there were so many barriers and obstacles that I had to face, my team and I had to face, in order to get those resources to the people it is owed. And I want to commend you guys for showing up for us, for advocating for us. Eric, advocating for your prevention team, irregardless of what upper management at the organization will say. You were an amazing manager, and I think a lot of people would say that. And as far as you, Amanda, I mean, I would have not had the courage to write that letter to the board. Lamia needed that support, especially given the humanitarian crisis going on. Like, to be in an organization, to have been arrested, to go through all these different things, and then come to your job when you're trying to do important work, and they also impede your progress. They also impede your ability to do very important work. It's a lot, and I'm not sure if we all would have been able to get through it had you not shown up for us. So thank you. Really sorry, being really unfortunate that you had to deal with what you dealt with. And I mean, we've spoken about the ways it's impacted you and your family. I sincerely hope and pray that things turn out to be better for you both. Is there anything else you guys would like to share, and let people know maybe where to find you, things that you're working on?
I have one more grievance that
Oh.
didn't fit into the...
Get it off your chest.
It didn't get off into that. So, as a linkage coordinator, as a tester,
Yeah.
I had to tell quite a few people that they were HIV positive.
Okay.
And obviously that's a not pleasant experience. But I took a lot of pride in it. Because when I was diagnosed, the person that told me, the medical professional, did a terrible job.
Yeah.
Made fun of me, belittled me, did not educate me, chastised me for not knowing sooner. And I struggled in my life really badly because of that. And looking back, it was more so than the diagnosis itself. It was the treatment of how I found out. So one of the things that I took a lot of pride in working at Hope and Help was when I did have to explain to someone that they were HIV positive, like as bad as an experience as that is, I knew that at least they would have a better experience than what I did.
Yeah.
And I will always remember the first reactive I ever had. I looked them in the eye and I said, do not worry. We're going to take care of you. We have a clinic. We have case management. You've got me. Like, we are going to take care of you. Don't worry about anything. And I almost immediately regretted ever making that promise because it was 4:00 and the clinic was busy. So he's going to have to come back some other time. So this person had to take that news and then go live with it with no resources, with no medication, with no nothing for 2 whole weeks before they came back. When they came back, they had never been contacted by case management. They showed me the dozens of times they were pleading with case management to please help, like, please help. And it is common. It is more common than not that when there is a new reactive at Hope and Help, they're pushed aside. If the docket is full, they have to wait.
When you say new reactive, for folk who may not be
With
acclimated
HIV.
with that language, these
Someone
are people who
diagnosed with HIV.
newly diagnosed with HIV. You're
In
saying
the moment that they find out what should happen, what the process is supposed to be, we immediately get them into care. We immediately get them on meds. They're not supposed to leave without meds in their hand, without a case manager, without, you know what I mean? Like all these resources. And it would happen over and over and over again. And
it's not because they didn't have the resources, correct?
no, it was all there. It was
just negligence.
It was
is what you're saying.
It was 4:00. The clinic closes at 4:30. Are you serious? This process is going to take another hour. He's going to have to come back. And oh, look at that. We're booked solid for another 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And some of those clients never came back.
And, you know, obviously, this is pretty kind of, would you say it's pretty normal at some organizations where occasionally patients lapse out of care, they're not able to be seen that same day, but the normal due process would be to reach out, schedule something, at least keep in contact so that way you can get them in care. And you're saying in this situation specifically and in some others.
Again, it depended on the whim of who was running in clinic. If they had a bad day and they were tired and they had a thing to get to and it was, like I said, 4:00, we close at 4:30. Doing intake for a new reactive is going to take at least an hour. That means I'm going to miss my thing. Have them come back. And I am of the opinion, because we are a full clinic, so we have patients coming in for just general checkups for all kinds of different things, not just HIV. I'm of the opinion that if someone gets diagnosed with HIV under our roof, and I'm the one telling them, I don't care if someone's in the lobby to have a general checkup. They can wait a couple of minutes. The HIV person gets the priority.
Yeah.
But they don't. And that was really, 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 really hard for me to see. And the other issue was case management isn't on property. They're not there. They work from home, you know? So when these clients come back and they can't get their case manager, they can't get on their meds, they can't get into the clinic, They don't see any of them. The case managers that are dropping the ball, Morgan, who's just flippantly blowing people off, they never have to actually sit in front of the client and explain any of this to them. We did. And I cannot put into words how awful it feels to tell someone in their eye the moment they found out, we are going to take care of you. And then guess what? I have to be the one down the road to tell them, I'm sorry, we didn't.
This this was a very heavy interview. Again, I'm sorry. I thank you guys for all the work that you guys have done thus far. I want to see better for you all. I hope, circumstances improve, and should you need anything, you can always reach out. But if there's anything you want to let the audience know, where to find you, where you can receive support.
I mean, I'm not really on social media at the moment, but
On your YouTube channel.
I'm starting a YouTube channel where I'm going to review horror movies, but that's not exactly. I'm looking for a job. I'm looking to get a car. I'm crossing my fingers I don't get evicted. But to be honest with you, all of those problems,
pale in comparison.
Quitting Hope and Help felt so much more of a relief than any anxiety I'm getting from this next chapter of my life.
I think that, I just want to highlight that there was so many amazing people within prevention, so many amazing people that were doing incredible and groundbreaking work that didn't get the credit that they deserved. And just everything, they just left everything on the line to do what they love. And that was it. That's what they were doing, a job that they loved. Mm-hmm. But everything else just crumbled on top of them.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for sitting and chatting with me. And thank you. Thank you again. Thank you for everything.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you.
Yes.
From day one, when you joined Hope and Help, you were sticking your neck out as far as it would go, nonstop.
Okay.
And you have kept the conversation alive. You have been the one that has given us the opportunity to share and have the courage to say these things, because these are definitely, it's a very difficult position to be in, and you have made that comfortable enough for people to speak up and speak out.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm trying. I think this
succeeding.
Yeah. I think it's
Eric for 2030.